back. Welcome to another episode of the Universal Church of Truth. Um, I am one half of your lovely host, Hunter, and with me once again is
Mary.
Yay, Mary. Um, we are here. We are gathered here today to talk about um, Marvel Studios' Miss Marvel, which has just premiered its first episode at the time that you're watching this. And I hope that everybody liked it because I really did. Let's jump right into it because I feel like, a lot to talk about. Mary, thoughts, feelings, concerns?
I really liked it. I really was not expecting to like it. I did not go into it thinking I would. I thought it'd be fine. I just thought it'd be just kind of bland, honestly. I like the comics. They're some of the first comics I ever read, and I loved the character. But I just kind of thought it was gonna be, I don't know, generic feeling and tone and stuff. But it wasn't, and it's really fun. And I think a lot of it works. And I'm not usually really into like teen or coming of age stories. I think that's part of why I was hesitant. But I think it's so far, I really like it. Surprisingly, like comic accurate, considering they kind of changed a very big thing about it. But yeah, overall, I really liked it. What about you?
I loved it. I also liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. A big part of that being I mean, as much as I love Marvel and I love the character of Miss Marvel, she was never like, one of the comic books that I was always trying to get my hands on or whatever. And I read those comics and I liked that character. Um, I was one of the three people who played that Avengers game that Square Enix released. And she was like the main character of that game. And I thought that game told her story really well. And I was excited for the show. I know there was a lot of concern about it. A lot of people were terrified of some of the stuff that they were changing and afraid they might change other things and that it might go too far and yada yada yada. But um, I think that the cast is really good. Like for me, a lot of why I like it so much is I think that everybody plays their part super super well, and it makes it really enjoyable and it feels really organic. And also, I love coming of age stories. I'm a sucker for a good teenager finding who they are story, and like this show is off to a really good start in regards to that. So it's really a lot more up my alley than I thought it would be, and I love it, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. Um, let's talk about episode 1, which I'm sure will have a title, but we don't know it yet until when it actually comes out. But this show starts off really strong with uh, a montage of people knowing about the Battle of Earth, which I think this show does a really good job of like showing us. There's been quite a few MCU projects that have tried to do the like this is what the MCU is like on the ground for real people, real normal people, but I feel like this show is doing that a lot better than some other projects have done it. In regards to like what a 16-year-old who is obsessed with YouTube and stuff, how they would see it through their eyes.
No, I agree. I think that this is like the first time I feel like we really have had that perspective of it, at least to your point, that felt authentic or just more real than the other ones. Like, I don't know. To me, it really did feel like the first time we were not within essentially, I lack of a better word, the Avengers kind of tier of like existence. And I do think, yeah, I think it's a good start. It's kind of fun. Well, that animation, I don't know what to call
Yeah.
it. But although, yeah, I thought that was just cute and fun. It kind of set the tone really well. But yeah,
I think I made a note about that on my phone, and I I can't remember what I called it, but yeah, I like that so much of like Kamala and her friends, and like texting conversations and information discovered online, and all that fun stuff is like displayed on buildings through graffiti or like you know, her videos are done through like clip art animation and like her drawings and all that fun stuff. And I thought it's so charming. Like charming was the word I kept coming back to. Where I was like, it's hard not to like it. Like it's so likable.
I think the quote that we gave, and then we got the little graphic of it to post on it. I use the word charming, and I've never, like, I don't use that word. And so I was just like, oh, and everybody used that word. So clearly it's just charming. Like, but yeah.
One of the first words that came to mind in my little graphic thing, it said, I just said Iman Vellani's name like 12 times, and then I said delightful, because that's like the other. It's like it's charming, it's delightful, like it's an adorable little, like, I mean, not to like discredit it, but at least at the beginning, it's just so like, I don't know, like I just have a fun time watching it, which is really great. Like you said though, people were concerned. I mean, we can address it right off the bat. People were concerned with them changing her powers. Um, I'm not sure that anybody wouldn't know this, but just in case people don't know, in the comics, her powers are a lot more like that of Mr. Fantastic, less so stretchy and more so in bigamy and and whatnot. And in this show, obviously, as you now probably have seen, she doesn't have that. It's like a light thing. And yeah, a light. She does like Green Lantern light crystal things. Um, a lot of people were really nervous about that. Uh, me maybe less so, just because I was less attached to the character, so I was more open to seeing where it went. But I'm curious, as someone who um, has read a lot of the comics, and you said they're some of the first comics you ever read. What are your thoughts on that power change, and like how do you think it looks when she's using it and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I love her powers in the comics. I mean, part of it's the comics, so it can look however they want it to look, but it looks great. And I get it wouldn't necessarily translate well to screen depending on the budget. I understand all that, but I like it better. We haven't seen the full extent of her light crystal powers, but he's not even a good name for him. So,
Yeah.
but hard to talk about. They are a little more generic. I mean, not that nobody else is stretchy and whatever, but it's just different. But I think so. For me, that was my concern. Is I just like the other ones better, and they do go really well with her coming of age story, because there's a lot of like self consciousness and like struggle with her identity. And she can shapeshift in the comics, so obviously that's how she gets the Miss Marvel mantle. She looks like Marvel old Carol Danvers mantle when she comes out of her. Get to that, the Inhuman.
Yeah.
So, that's another question. How is she going to get the name Miss Marvel? I don't know. But so powers wise, but I don't think it's like the end of the world by any means. But I do think the change from Inhuman to we don't know is good and bad. It's good because we don't know, and that's kind of fun. I'm actually probably the first time I've been watching some of these and been like genuinely like, I have no idea where this is going. I'm really excited to find out. I'm excited for next week. Like probably the most I've been, honestly. But that is big, and I think, well, I don't know. That's part of it too. I think some people are pretty convinced it's still going to be Inhuman somehow, and I don't see that. But I don't want to be an idiot at the end of the day if somehow that all comes around and works out. But I don't see how that would make sense. But it still has all the elements of what made that line good for her, because it's still going to be, from what we can tell, it comes from the bangle she gets from the box from her grandmother. So it's going to be tied to family. It's going to be tied to her ancestors. Kind of like Inhuman was. This seems more personal too, so I think that's positive. The negative is it doesn't connect to a bigger, well-established group that we don't really have in the MCU anyway. But that was kind of the comics tie there. So I don't know if that was very long-winded, but so far I'm fine with it. I like her stretchy powers better, but I don't think it ruins her character of the show by any means.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you said all of that because for the most part, it's also exactly what I was thinking. Is specifically what you said about like this is probably the first time in like a decade or more that I'm watching an MCU thing or a Marvel thing, or really like a comic book thing in general, and I truly don't know what her origin is going to be because as we're seeing it play out thematically and tonally, it does feel so accurate to those comics, but in terms of the specifics, like you said, she's not an Inhuman. For the folks at home who maybe don't know what we're talking about when we keep saying Inhuman, in the comics, Kamala gets her powers from she's an Inhuman, and so Terrigen Mist, and then Cocoon, and then break out of Cocoon, and then powers, and then she has to deal with that. We got our boy Black Bolt, and Multiverse of Madness, and then we lost our boy Black Bolt in Multiverse of Madness. I know that Miss Villani is as upset about that as I am, which she gets massive respect points for that. But um, yeah, so I'm kind of thrilled that like each week is almost as much of a mystery to me as it is to like the casual viewer, and that's kind of like a fun, exhilarating thing to have again. And like we said earlier, like to have that on top of a show that is just so charming. Like I'm excited to see new episodes and like see where these characters go next. Um, well, let's jump into some specifics. First of all, I really like that Scott Lang has a podcast because to me
Yeah,
that makes a
yeah,
lot of sense.
yeah. I mean, I have the beginnings of a wild theory that is kind of related to him. So I think there are references to him on purpose. But I mean, with Moon Knight, I just went too far, and nothing worked out. So I don't know. But yes, I do like that. And she says, what did she say? She said, "Seems like a really nice guy" or something like that.
Yeah,
But that is
there's a few
that
references to him.
there are, yeah, yeah, there are. But so, which to be fair, like Hawkeye had a shit ton of Ant-Man references. Like they were really gone for. I think they wanted him to show too, so maybe they just all love him.
They just know
But
people love Paul Rudd, and they are just like they're gonna know that at the very least. And he's like their safest. Like I feel like you can reference Scott Lang's Ant-Man and not have to worry about like, well, where is this character going, or like what are they doing right now in the MCU? Like he's a pretty standard like character that's just like, yeah, he's just doing Ant-Man things and has a podcast, and like that's probably fine. Um, what are your thoughts on the fact that like everyone knows exactly how the Battle of Earth went down?
I think that's so interesting. I doubt they'll ever really get more specific than this about it. Maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but yeah. Like, did they have video of it? Were there that many interviews with that many people? Because it's just like too many details. So, like
Yeah.
Captain Marvel came at the ninth hour, and flew
Like
down and punched. Like,
And I can understand, like we were just talking about Scott Lang, like him having a podcast. I'm sure that on his podcast, he's like talked about some stuff that happened and people know, or like other things along the lines of that, revealing bits and pieces. But it was just like so many specifics. And I was like, they were in the middle of nowhere and like half the universe was gone. Well, I guess it just come back at that point. Like people were distracted, no one was filming it. Like, I don't know. It was a lot.
and honestly, okay, if there was video, like I don't know, there's a lot of Stark shit around. That's fine, but did they show it to the general public? Because that seems horrifying. Like, if people like Kamala could just like, go on YouTube and watch that fucking. That would
Yeah, and
be
like
that
how much of
much.
it is there? Like, did everyone just watch Tony Stark die? Like, is that what's going on?
And honestly, it still doesn't quite answer a lot of the questions. Like they know about Infinity Stones, the public does clearly, but like, do they know the full details of like how that worked? Why Tony
Yeah,
had his own gauntlet and why he died? Like, I don't know. And it's fiction. I get that, but it is kind of fun to think about. It is a weird one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really nitpicky thing, but I just like I watched the episode twice, and both times I was just like, well, how did what like, why do they know so much? Um, yeah, so also we were just kind of talking about the general like vibe of this whole thing. The music slaps. I think the music choice in this whole episode is really good. Um, that was also a thing with Moon Knight where I feel like they're doing a really good job of like finding music from like the cultures and like the worlds that they're pulling from and just getting like introducing the larger like earth pop culture, everyone who's watching this show because it is a Marvel Studios project, and now everyone's like, oh wow, there's like this music slaps, this is great, I love it, I've already added some of it to my playlist, it's awesome.
Yeah, the music is good. And I agree, Moon Knight was similar in the fact that it was really just good. Like they
Yeah.
nailed that. The end credits too, and a lot of that was the music that I really liked the end credits again. So, music.
Yeah, so tell us, as our once again our resident comic book expert, I would like to dive into Kamala's family a little bit, just because they are such central figures in this episode, and it seems like they're going to continue to be very central figures, especially considering that her powers now seem to stem from that lineage and all that sort of stuff. So her dad is the best. That's my opinion. Is that he's the greatest.
Funny, I will say to me, um, the show they're like significantly less strict. Ironically, I know it's like kind of half the plot of this first episode is how strict they are, and they still are. But like, I think maybe they're a little more fun, like live
Mm,
action. They were in the comics for the most part. Like they were a bit more like just kind of uptight. You didn't have him, painting himself green and like being the Hulk, and that was so sweet. That
yeah,
whole little scene where she got mad and said it was humiliating was so like real. Like that's a
yeah.
real thing happened, but it was so heartbreaking. Oh,
I
he
know.
was
That's like the folly of that's like the folly of getting older. Is I feel like had I watched this when I was 16, I would have fully been on her side. And like I still kind of am. I totally get where she's coming from. But then I see her dad do that, and I'm thinking, oh, that's so nice of him. And like he just wants her to go and have a good time. I'm like, just let your dad go. Just let dad come. Just let him come and have a good time.
but yeah, yeah, he's really great in this in general. Yeah, he's just a character. He's just such a dad too. I mean,
Yeah.
the Zuzu that Bruno built, he's like so into this like voice control technology, and just be like, a lot of it is just very relatable, and like obviously it's a culture you don't usually see, especially in the MCU, but just like in TV like this. So like, not saying that's relatable. That's kind of half the point. But it's nice that you just have parents that are parents. You have a brother with a but like it's done so well. Nothing feels like it's overly like out of place or like like they don't. And obviously, people who made the show know what they're doing in that respect. But I feel like it came across very perfectly. Like I love the little family unit. They don't baby a lot of it. Like they'll say words in, and I could be wrong if it's Urdu or Arabic. I'm not entirely sure, but words that people like me don't know, and they don't use subtitles for them. They don't explain. Like they just let that be part of the conversation. I think little details
Yeah.
like that, I think, really go into why this is so just nailed it on the head. I think.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. That actually kind of reminds me of the new West Side Story. They did a similar thing where when the characters were speaking Spanish, they like didn't subtitle it, they didn't baby it, they just let it happen. And then um, in the press conference following that, they asked Steven Spielberg about it, and he said that he had made that decision because one, it was more authentic, and all the obvious reasons, but two, that he felt like a lot of the time we don't really I mean, for the people who understand it, that's fantastic and validating and lovely. But like, even like for you and I, like people who don't know what they're saying specifically, like we know what they're saying. Like you can tell based on like tone and emotion and the direction of the conversation, like what is going on, and like people are people, and you don't really need to like know all the specifics of it. And I um I felt very much the same sort of thing was going on here, whereas just like even when like I didn't even notice sometimes that they weren't speaking English because I was just like you can just pick up on sort of what they're talking about, uh, which is great. But yeah, what was I gonna write? I really like the scene when she asks if she can go to Avengers Con and they're saying no, and her dad is like, "Well, it's not that we don't trust you," and then her mom was like, "No, we don't trust you," and he was like, "No, she trusts you," and she was like, "No, I don't." And I really, I really liked that specifically because it was such a good display of like the dynamic between her parents and the whole family dynamic, and her dad being like the soft one and her mom being the one who's like, a little bit more strict. And like I just thought that was all really nice and honest and lovely. And her brother is really great too. I like that even though he's like the religious one, he's also still really fun. I feel like there's always a tendency to take the character who's like more religious and just make them boring and be like, well, they're more religious, so they suck. But like they didn't do that here, which I liked.
He's also probably in the comics, like he was like much
Mhm.
more religious and like formally, really, So his character to me is also significantly different in that way. I love though. There's so many things that are different, but at the same time they're the exact same as the comics. It's like wild how they managed to do that, and I'm very impressed. But because they throw like everything in there, like the brother and his fiance at this time. Um, she's right the comics, but not from the exact same part that the rest of us is from. Like they're really pulling it, and I think that's fun. And they're doing it. Doesn't feel like too much. Doesn't feel like random stuff everywhere. It's going well.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. Is like so much of this just feels so organic. Is like the other word that keeps coming up. Like I think oftentimes we talk about how like, well, they have this plot line, but then they had to throw this plot line in there because there's like certain things they have to do and yada yada, and then we feel like we have to make excuses for it. And with this show, there I'm straight up just like, no, like it all feels right. It all it all feels like what it's supposed to be feeling. Um, and it is so relatable. Like, first of all, I just love Kamala in this because I relate to her so hard in so many levels. Of like, the scene when they're talking about she has to go. She's like, oh, I guess I have to decide my future, and she has all this like crazy anxiety because everyone's like, well, what college are you going to go to, and what's your whole future going to be? And like, you're 16, but you got to know all this right now. And then the way that she takes that and her coping mechanism is to then pretend that Captain Marvel is flying outside the car, like alongside. And I used to do the same exact thing, except in my head it was Spider-Man swinging from buildings as I looked out the window. So I was like, I'm watching that and I'm like, wow, I feel that. We're the same. I'm glad that this character exists like within canon. Um, but we should also probably talk about Bruno, which is the opposite of what Disney usually wants us to do. But that was awful. Mary's looking at me like, why do we let him co-host this?
Chance I would never have gotten that, but I did. So
um, yeah, it was like the number one hit song of 2021. So I feel like we got to talk about it. But I like Bruno. He's another one that's just like he just was that.
yes, you sounded very surprised.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to find a nice way to say this. Um, okay, so Matt Lintz, before he was on Miss Marvel, was on The Walking Dead. for like 2 or 3 seasons before he was tragically murdered hard. And yeah, and it wasn't an issue with Matt Lintz, but I remember I actively didn't like his character on The Walking Dead, and he would just annoy me a lot when he was on screen. And it wasn't him as an actor. Matt Lintz, if you're hearing this, I don't hate you, but I remember not liking his character that much on The Walking Dead, and I think in the back of my head going into Miss Marvel, part of me still held that like dislike of his Walking Dead character, and then I was worried. I was really worried that was going to affect how I saw Bruno. And then I watched the show, and I was like, "Oh no, he's fine. This is great." That was a really long dumb tangent to say Bruno is really good, and the chemistry between Matt Lintz and Manvolani is real good.
Yeah. In the comics, he always had this like soul patch looking thing going on. So I remember early on thinking this guy was like 37. I was really confused about the whole thing. So and I knew he wasn't in the comics, right? He's, they're the same age, but I think he's actually a little older. But I know. So for part of it was like an adjustment. I'm like, okay, this kid looks like a kid to me. But yeah, I do like him. He's interesting. I mean, he does some wild stuff, like science-wise, in the comics, like off that. And it's a different universe where that's a bit more normal. So we're not going to see, him making clones of Kamala that run over the entire town, kind of thing, like that early on, at least. So, but he does do some fun stuff, and he does have kind of an interesting connection to Wakanda eventually. So he could be an interesting character overall. They could go places with him. I just don't know if they will.
I do remember the soul patch thing. I think I wrote that out of my memory, but then once you brought it up, it vividly came back to me, and I was like, yeah, why did they do that? But yeah, I like that every comic book adaptation of any character ever always has to have at least one character who is very smart, and I like I like Bruno in that role here. I feel like we get what is his backstory in the comics? Because Kamala makes a quick mention when she's trying to convince her parents to let her go to Avengers Con about him not having much of a family, and it kind of seems like he lives in a bodega or something, and
trying to remember the specific. I want to say I know she met him in I want to say kindergarten, very young class. It was she was loudly talking about who's that smelly kid in the corner, and her parents were he. I want to say he was in maybe not foster care, but maybe with his grandparents. Something happened to his parents; they were no longer in the picture. But other than that, I don't remember too specific. And it's definitely different here because in the comics he had a brother who was pretty significant in the plot early on. In Miss Marvel. Was just always around. His name is Vince. I hope that's right. But and we haven't seen that at all. And to your point, he looks like he almost lives alone above the Circle Q convenience store he works out, which is odd just legally in some ways. But I don't fully know, but he definitely had not the best family around him in the comics either. But I don't remember if it got much more specific than that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of hints in this thing, and we might be falling back into the same Moon trap where they make a whole bunch of offhand comments, and in my brain I'm like, yeah, there's gonna be a whole episode about that, and then it just never. I'm sure there's not gonna be a whole episode about Bruno's family, but I'm used. Some TV shows do that, and you never really know what's gonna go on. So yeah, I like Bruno. And I like her other friends, who I feel like in this episode we don't learn too much about. Nakia, but she also seems really fun and likable. Let's talk about. I feel like we're gonna end up talking about Avengers Con for a while because there's so many cameos and not cameos, but Easter eggs and fun stuff in there. But first, I do want to talk about the bangles that she wears. So in the comics, I know that she is an Inhuman, and the powers come from her DNA, and that ancestry deep inside of her. Um, are there bangles like that in the comics that really like play a role at all, or even if they don't have anything to do with their powers, but it's just like, oh, these are my family's bangles, and I wear them as part of my suit?
Yeah. It was like a little flashback, and I'm not sure what the issue number. That's embarrassing. It was her great grandma. No, it was like her great ancestor woman had wedding bangles. And
Ancestor woman.
oh, I don't know. A great grandmother to some other great degree, but she gives them to Aisha, which is Kamala's great grandmother. And the one who sent the bangles was her grandmother. So, I mean, what I'm saying, there's a lot of ancestor women. It's going to get rough. But anyway, yeah, family heirloom. Money was hidden in them when escaping. I believe it was during partition, not coming from. Yeah, so during partition. Yeah, they were passed. They were heirlooms, but there was nothing to do with the powers now. The powers thing is seemingly and objectively very unique to the live action, but does have, and it was always part of her costume or suit too. She always wore those.
Yeah, so I knew they were part of her suit. I didn't know if they were like a major part of her, like abilities or lore or anything like that.
No, but family history, yes, but not any of the superness type of thing.
Great. Also, I want to talk about. I'm looking at the many. I wrote too many notes. That's the issue. I gotta find a better balance going forward, because sometimes I don't write enough notes and then I forget things, and then now I've written too many notes, and most of this is not even worth talking about. Right. So I did write down. I like that this show. I feel like it like addresses some like big things very casually in like sort of a funny childlike way. Like, I mean, there's no dancing around the fact that like this is a Muslim family in the United States of America, and like a lot of people in the United States of America aren't cool with that, which sucks, or are very ignorant of that and the culture and all of that sort of thing, which sucks. But the show it doesn't shy away from that at all. It's just like I was kind of surprised by the way they tackled it without it being like a whole thing, at least in this episode. Um, Specifically, I really like the sequence where she's like walking down the hallway, and the one guy, her like gym teacher calls her Camellia, and then when she is at her driver's test, which I love, by the way, that whole sequence is really funny, especially when her parents were yelling at the teacher afterwards, and I was like, yeah. But when she, says a little prayer before she starts, like her brother told her to, and then the instructor's like, bless you. And I was just like, wow. Like, that's unfortunate, but I also really liked that they were throwing that stuff in there, not like pretending that it wasn't a thing. Also, another little Easter egg throughout this episode, the building that her and Bruno like to hang out on the roof, has a big neon sign that we never really see like straight on, but you can definitely tell what it says. And what it says is Edison Electric. I know what that is a reference to within the Miss Marvel thing, but Mary, I'm gonna let you tell the people about it.
Okay. Well, and actually, well, I guess that requires a little bit of context. So yeah, so her first villain was the inventor, also who happened to be a clone of Thomas Edison, but in a bird body.
Absolutely.
a large parrot, and there's a little parrot that looks like him in that first montage of beginning somewhere between all the Battle of Earth too. So that's a nod to it. It's hard to see them getting into it this first season with all the other stuff they're going into. But yeah, I mean, that was her first. I mean, that guy was doing some weird stuff. He was like basically abducting kids and like convincing them to be like electric power sources. Like they were just kind of basically sacrificing themselves. And he made a lot of inventions that would attack things. She would have to fight them early on. It's the inventor for that reason. So yeah, that's what it's a reference to. And then, I mean, there are multiple references now. Is it going to be a thing? I wouldn't think so, just because there's not much time. There seem to be things brewing.
Also don't think that the inventor is going to be in this season. I remember one of the first things rumored about this show, like probably over a year ago now. Yeah, no, it had to have been like shortly after it was announced, so like years ago. Was that inventor was going to be the villain, and I was like, that's ridiculous. I don't know how they're going to pull it off, and I don't think that they are yet, but I still think that there's hope for Thomas Edison clone who is also a bird and abducting children. So,
I can see a version of him down the line, and part of it's not even. I do think it would be a hard thing to pull off, even if you watered it down from what it literally was in the comics. But honestly, my thought is really just. I mean, we know the rumors of kind of who might be the adversaries we get in the post-credit scene. I guess we'll talk about that. There's a lot going on already. It's hard to see like where you fit in, and yeah, it'd be really kind of awkward to pull off, and it would not be likely comic accurate because it's kind of difficult. Yeah, but that would be that reference.
Well, you just said something very interesting, and that was the characters who are currently still rumored to be the villain. What are they called, and what are they about? Let's jump into that real quick.
There's so many rumors on this that I'm not even convinced I'm always on the same page as everyone else. But the rumors in my mind going into this were clandestine.
Yeah.
Which was odd. Seems like it could be true, but it's odd. And then, I mean, they kind of stem from a djinn, which is referenced multiple times, djinn, in this episode.
Yes. That was the segue that I was looking for.
The face was kind of just thrown out there, I think, just really like as an aside a couple of times, like, oh, you're still afraid of the evil djinn?
Yeah.
And that was a big rumor, like generally going around that she was Jin, everybody was Jin, like, and people were really mad because that was like at the same time the Inhuman thing seemed to be for sure, like, thrown aside. But from my experience, I could be off on this one. I don't think there's a ton of comic book reference for much of that. Like Clandestine's its own thing. It's very different. They're not really villains. They're like a superhero family. I mean, it's a big family, so there's rough people in it. But so I just really don't know. Like, it's very vague. I kind of have an idea if those rumors are true, like what it could look like. But honestly, there's just not a lot that I think it's based on comics-wise that I know of. But yes.
So everybody listening at home, based on our track record on this show, more specifically Mary's theories, this means that Clandestine will be the bad guys, and Mary doesn't think they will, so they will, and she's gonna have to apologize for it later.
In the comics, they aren't, so I think it's a different version. I think they are probably doing. Talk about this probably more next episode, if ever. But I think I don't know exactly. And I think that's what we talked about. The origin's just very vague and very, for the casual viewer and somebody who reads comics, somebody who knows the MCU, well, whatever. Like, it's just mysterious, and that's pretty fun. But that's about as much as I can guess at this point.
Great. Well, now that we've talked about all that fun stuff, truthfully, I just wanted to pick on you about none of your Moon Knight theories coming true. But
Yeah.
nah.
Honestly, I would have liked it better if mine did. So, that's a win in itself, I guess.
Truthfully, I think that show would have been a lot better if they used all my ideas.
Exactly. Hmm.
All right, let's talk about Avengers Con, which is super fun. I've always thought this was a fun thing in the comics and in the video game and now in this. It's totally a thing. I'm surprised there's not one in real life yet. Like this is totally a thing that in a world where superheroes existed that they would do, that people would do. Um, I think it's really fun. Um, I there was a lot of references and Easter eggs of like everything that's ever existed. Some of them I was confused by slash like wondered. So let's start at the beginning. First of all, Avengers Con, which I thought this was like a cool little detail. They decided to hold the first ever Avengers Con at Camp Lehigh, which is where, as you dedicated fans watching this know, that's where Steve Rogers sort of started out as Captain America and went back to in the Winter Soldier, and then got was a base for Shield, and then got blown up by Arnim Zola, and is now apparently a convention center. So, as things go, I thought that was really fun. There was a few like Easter eggs throughout that this sort of goes with the like how much do people know about the Battle of Earth thing, where I'm just like, it's funny that they were clearly included as real world references, but within the context of the universe it just makes me wonder, like specifically there's a little like art piece of Steve Rogers like America's ass thing.
Oh,
um, and I thought that was really funny because I was like, he literally made that joke while traveling through time to a different timeline, and no one heard it like except for Ant-Man is the only one who would know. So the only possible explanation that this exists, right? Like, or at least the you know most logical explanation is that in universe, in canon, in the MCU, there's just a lot of people who really admire Captain America's butt, and it's become a thing. And I love that. I think that's great. Um, a lot of fun cosplay, which as someone who has been to many conventions in real life, I thought that was fun. They did a really good job emulating that. There were a few cosplays where I was like, interesting. Specifically, like the Dora Milaje, that how that's pronounced. There was a lot of Wakandan cosplay, which I thought was interesting. That like people in the United States, because in universe that's like just a different culture. So like, I thought that was like a funny thing.
that's fair. That's a good point.
That's like,
Well, at first I thought you were going to say, like, why would they know that much? And then I was going back, well, it did get opened up. I think.
no, I
No, I know. I was just thinking, because they don't talk about it, And
yeah.
we did so many things like Civil War and then like Black Panther that immediately went into Infinity War. So a lot of it just kind of like didn't happen at the time. Anyway, but that's what I thought you were going to say. And then I got your real point. That's fair.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, could you imagine if in real life someone showed up to a convention and they were just like dressed it was just like they were just dressed in like a different cultural attire and they were like, this is my cosplay.
that is, that's true. I mean, that's not obviously something people have to think about. I mean,
Yeah, which is
they don't have to think about it in real life because Wakanda is fictional.
we don't have to get into that. I did think it was sort of funny where I mean the maybe the Dora Milaje like makes more sense because they are sort of the royal guard and also like really kick ass and yada yada. But I did think that was kind of funny. Also Groot. That was the other one that caught my attention, was that apparently people like Groot on Earth, but Groot was on Earth for approximately an hour. And well, maybe because they stayed for Tony's funeral, but like again, unless people saw the Battle of Earth, like how are people knowing about Groot. Like, I don't know. I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Where was? Oh, it's been a while. So sad. Where was he at the end of Infinity War / the beginning of Endgame? Where? Oh, he got snapped. That's why I don't know. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he got snapped. He showed up for the Battle of Wakanda.
I was trying to picture him in New Asgard, and I'm like, I don't think he was there. That's yeah, okay. So yeah, he was literally gone. Okay.
He wasn't even there for like the whole Battle of Wakanda because he showed up with Thor like towards the end.
Yeah.
And then he got snapped out of existence for 5 years, and then he reappeared for the Battle of Earth, stuck around for Tony's funeral, which I imagine he wasn't like running around Times Square where everyone can see him. Like they were probably hanging out in their ship for a couple days. And then he went back to space. So, I mean, listen, I know there's rumors that the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special is going to take place on Earth, so maybe that happens before this, and there's like a big thing where everyone sees Groot. I'm getting ahead of myself, who knows? But yeah, so these are just like a few things where I'm like, it's funny to me that these are all part of the convention when like in universe, it's like it just like felt strange to me. Also, Black Widow finally gets her recognition from the people of being as important as Tony in the whole thing. No Vision though. People still say screw that guy.
That's true. Or at least it goes around Twitter as like a deleted scene or script from WandaVision. I'm assuming it's true. I've seen it so many times, but it's like Wanda giving this speech about why nobody cares about Vision dying, even though they care about Tony, and kind of Natasha's thought it's extra funny. Ooh, I mean, he's dead. He's not. He's dead. But White Vision, would they know about White Vision?
They know about Groot. White Vision has been in public more than Groot has, so I feel like.
Yeah. Well.
Who knows? Who knows? People just don't. They don't care. There's also. I'm just looking at. I viciously wrote down a bunch of the Easter eggs in my phone as I was watching it through the second time. The guy announcing the cosplay contest. Unless I am tragically mistaken, and I don't think I am, because he has a pretty distinct look, and I hope that he's pumped that I recognize him. That is Agent M, who he's like he works for Marvel, like he in real life. Hold on, I'm gonna find his exact job description. I googled Agent M, and it gave me the Michael Jackson character from Men in Black. So not the same. Ryan Penagos. He's worked for Marvel for a really, really, really long time. He's like one of the head of their like media editing director, something like that. But he's been very active within the Marvel fandom and like with their social media team and stuff for years. So I kind of got a little smile out of him actually showing up in something, and the place that he shows up being Avengers Con and Miss Marvel just made so much sense, and it was like a wonderful little thing. So shout out to Agent M.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly didn't. I honestly, there were so many Easter eggs that I knew were there, but I just kind of was like, I don't know if I want. And I've watched that episode 3 or 4 times. Like I ran out of views. We have the option to watch, so I just never wanted to. I don't know. I assumed other people would scour that stuff for Easter eggs. So
yeah, I didn't plan on like noting every little thing because we could go through and talk about each one, and most of it is pretty like inconsequential. There was a few things that I noticed that I actively wanted to point out because I thought they were fun. Another fun thing that I noticed was the actual cosplay designs. I think it was another like how often has Captain Marvel been on Earth in the past couple years? Right, which is referenced at the beginning of the episode, but Kamala's cosplay is specifically her suit from the Battle of Earth. with like the red with the darker top and then like the mohawk thing. So specifically that one, not the one that she more famously has worn on Earth from like the first Captain Marvel and stuff. And then Zoe Zimmer's cosplay is, oh boy, my laptop's dying. Zoe Zimmer's cosplay is like a comic accurate Miss Marvel from her early days, where it's more like silky and smooth and yeah. So I thought that was like a fun little Easter egg too.
Yeah, it was their way, because that's what Kamala looks like when she first shapeshifts at all into Miss Marvel. So I mean, it's kind of a nod to still get that. But yeah, I never resisted, and it was kind of a joke here. Just as like, why is this girl like, lack of a better term, trying to look real cute, like a non-accurate. And I will say, I think that's something worth mentioning is Captain Marvel not really being around. I think that's gonna come into play more. I kind of hope it does, because I mean, obviously Kamala looks up to her. That's like the whole premise. Great, love it.
Right.
But she in the MCU, Captain Marvel, has just not been around. Like,
Yeah.
Earth, like, and then that half second in the 90s and then left. You know, so like, that's, to your point, that's what Kamala wears, because that's the only thing she's seen her in at all. That's the little replica that I have dangling from the ceiling at Avengers Con of Captain Marvel. It's the same. So I wonder if there's going to come a time where it's like soon rather than later. I think eventually it will. But if Kamala has to struggle with like, why wasn't my hero around, or why isn't she around now, or that, I think there's a little bit of foreshadowing of
Yeah.
this person's not around.
If not in this show specifically, then probably in the Marvels when she actually meets her. I can imagine that being like a conversation. But yeah, that was always something that intrigued me of like, in theory, I'm honestly fine with them making Captain Marvel more of like a galactic hero who comes to Earth sometimes. Like, I'm fine with that. There's a ton of heroes on Earth. Like, she has a bigger power set than, you know, like a lot of the villains that pop up on Earth. And all that. And she makes a good point in the Avengers movies too. And she's like, yeah, I mean, like the snap happened everywhere, and Earth has like the Avengers, but like other places don't. So I gotta go help. Like, that's a good point. And I'm fine with that. But it does make you wonder how you then have a character who like looks up to her and idolizes her, and it's like, how much of her have you actually seen to decide that she is like your idol, you know? Which is interesting. I mean, it seems like maybe the whole idea of her coming in at like the 11th hour in the battle for Earth is like a big factor in why Kamala likes her so much. I feel like that was kind of hinted at in the beginning, but yeah, I mean, that's going to be something that's fun to explore in the future. But that the whole Avengers Con sequence where she kind of like discovers her powers and she leaves the gloves from Bruno in the room. I did think it was funny the second time around that Bruno did a Bruce Banner cosplay. And it made me laugh thinking, what if Kamala had shown up as the Hulk? That would have been funny. But a lot of Bruce Banner references in this episode. She-Hulk coming to a TV near you soon. In case you forgot. Yeah, what did you think of that whole sequence of her discovering her powers and accidentally using them on stage? And
They, kind of like I talked about, they like copied the comics without looking like the comics at all. It's great. So in the comics, it's not, she goes to a party she's not supposed to go to, and in the show, her mom calls Avengers Con a party. I thought that was sweet. And she, after that party, that's when she just kind of wandered away and got into the mist and then got her powers. But she sees Zoe from a distance get in, like fall into like the river and like not come up. And so she shapeshifts and like scoops up with her hand out of the water. That's how she saves her, and then runs off. And people took pictures. It's like, oh, Miss Marvel's here, blah, blah. So it's like kind of the same thing. She's dressed as Captain Marvel. People think, they don't think she's Captain Marvel, but they don't know who she is. She ultimately, even though it's all her fault, saves Zoe with a big arm and fist, that whole shebang, even though it's not stretchy, and then runs off. Social media goes off, you know, this person's around. So I did like how they managed to keep it basically the same kind of
Yeah, I mean, it's like the same exact spirit of the moment,
Yeah.
even if it's not exactly like the events.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun. I laughed way harder than I should have when Zoe got clobbered by that swinging bolt. Was it a Ant-Man helmet or a hammer? I feel like I'm already forgetting what it was, but
The Ant-Man helmet was what fell off and hit everything
right,
else, and Mjolnir is what came back.
right. Yeah, I both times I watched that episode, I got a massive chuckle out of her just like the way they shot that scene. She just gets like off like a full body slam off screen. I was like, dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. I like that. I like that whole thing. Yeah, and I guess one of the last things to because that brings us right into kind of like the ending scene of the episode, which is when she goes home and her mother is very disappointed in her, and there's more hints at her, family lineage being complicated. And then we kind of see her smile that she has superpowers right before we cut to credits. And then you kind of hinted at it earlier, but this episode does have a post-credit scene. And it is the return of a character that I truthfully wasn't expecting to return to the MCU, but I'm kind of think it's cool that he's going to be like a recurring player here. And that is Agent P. Cleary of the Department of Damage Control.
Yeah, damage control.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realize in No Way Home he was damage control, I guess. I just thought it was generic.
Yeah, I did some looking into that, and damage control has had an interesting string.
They're going for something though. I mean, it's very ominous. Post credit scene. Like clearly, we're not gonna like damage control. In the past, they weren't really bad guys. Like from Homecoming, we know that it's a stark joint initiative with the government to clean up stuff. And then they had a big collection that obviously Peter Parker got stuck in Homecoming. And I think before that, like Coulson would mention their collection. So they have stuff and they clean up stuff. But now they're like seeing people with powers on the internet and bringing them in. That's what they said. Yeah. Something has changed course since.
Yeah, and I wonder if that was like a side effect of the blip or like what's going on with that. But
I think they're bringing the Sokovia Accords back around, at least for a bit in focus. And I think I like that because they they went into Infinity War pretty quick. We didn't see that face where the Accords really did anything. So, and they mentioned in WandaVision that they're still there, even though nobody seemed to invoke those on that situation. But what do I know? But I'm going to guess that that's at least part of what they're.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe bet. But yeah, it's interesting that Department of Damage Control has started as they start as literally what their name is, which is just like we clean up after superheroes messes. And then now, according to this post-credit scene and the events of No Way Home, it feels like they've transitioned into law enforcement, which is like an interesting turn. But yeah, I mean, we don't get much. We just see that Cleary and his partner, I assume, are now aware that there is a new hero in Jersey and that they have to go bring her in. And that leads us off into the next episode, which is very exciting. And that'll come out next week.
Yes. Good.
Yeah, I feel like it comes out next week, episode 2. We've seen it. Like,
I don't think that's a secret.
I don't think we have to. We saw episode 2 and
15th, midnight Pacific time, 3 a.m. Eastern time, episode 2.
episode 2, where we will definitely be watching it for the first time. And then you will see the next episode of the Universal Church of Truth, which we are definitely not about to record in like 10 minutes. So it's gonna be great. Um, but yeah, I think that's a good spot to. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about from episode 1? I feel like we jumped through a few things quickly, but also I think that we kind of talked about everything.
Yeah, I think in terms of breaking things down, I think we definitely hit all the.
Yeah,
Because
because
there's a lot of teen story happening, which is great.
yeah,
In terms of what I think people are like really trying
but
to.
this is not. No one, none of you watching this at home. This is not a recap. This is a breakdown. We're very serious, and we are very intelligent and nerdy, and that's what you're here for. Um,
That doesn't convince you we're
if
intelligent.
that doesn't convince you to come back, if you're still here and you're not coming back next week, you should have turned this off like 50 minutes ago. So I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with whoever's listening to this part. Um, yeah. Anyway. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Universal Church of Truth about Miss Marvel episode 1, which will probably have a title at some point, but we don't know it yet. I have been one half of your host, Hunter, and
I was going to take that. I have been the other half of your host, Mary. Yep, crushed it.
that'll be better next week when we record next week and not in 10 minutes. So, yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out. Be well.